What has changed since the start of free agency? What has changed for our show for today? It's Fantasy Football Today. Welcome to the show. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. That's Dave Richard. As you can see, no Adam Azer. He is getting ready for his trip to South Florida. He's going to join us live in studio on Thursday. So that's going to be a fun show. Looking forward to seeing that and hopefully stealing his wallet once again for those of you that listen to us for a long time. We'll have some fun with Adam in studio. But I have a fun show for you today. We're going to take a look at some of the rankings changes for us following free agency. But first, guys, I want to start with a news item from yesterday and maybe what could be a rankings debate already for who the number one overall pick is, because Bijan Robinson got some company in Atlanta with Brian Robinson signing with the Falcons. So now we have the Tyler Algier replacement. And so I got this question yesterday from one of our editors who wanted me to write a story about the running back change in Atlanta, or the addition in Atlanta. And is Bijan Robinson the number one overall pick? And I think for me, I don't know about the two of you guys, Jahmyr Gibbs is still the number one overall pick. So I'll ask this question to you. Now that we know who the backfield mates are in Atlanta and Detroit, with David Montgomery leaving, we have Isaiah Pacheco now, the new number two running back there for the Lions. And now we know that the most confusing situation in fantasy sports is make sure you click the right B Robinson in your draft room. Because Brian Robinson and Bijan Robinson are on the same team. How do we feel about the number one overall pick? Heath, I'll start with you. Who is number one overall for you? PPR, half PPR, non-PPR, you can make the decision.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't get too passionate debating either one of them. I think they're both good choices, but I'm going to stick with Gibbs. I think Brian Robinson's a little bit better, particularly in short yardage, than Isaiah Pacheco is. That's not something Isaiah Pacheco was very good at, even when he had the lead job in Kansas City. So I think there's a little more risk there. There's probably a better offense in Detroit. I think the really interesting thing is the problems we had with Tyler Algier in Atlanta. It's an entirely new coaching staff. They may not even want to distribute touches that way. And there's a new offensive coordinator in Detroit too, but Dan Campbell's still there. Thankfully, the guy he loves and David Montgomery's not. I did think it was interesting thinking about what you said with Brian Robinson, like, who's the most likely of us to try to trade Brian Robinson to someone, hoping they'll think it's Bijan?
I don't think he's on the show today. I'm with you, Heath. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the number one, and it's close. It makes me want to pick second overall this year, and just let whoever has the 101 in my fantasy draft take whoever you want. I'll settle for Bijan Robinson at number two, or Gibbs if you decide to take Bijan. It's real close between the two of them. I just like the offense a little bit better in Detroit. I think Gibbs, we've seen him without David Montgomery, and the upside is crazy high. I don't think Isaiah Pacheco is going to take a lot of work away from him, just like I don't think Brian Robinson is going to take a lot of work away from Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to fault you if you like Bijan better, but give me Jahmyr Gibbs. I just think he's got a little bit more to him, a little bit more of a ceiling with that same exact type of 20 PPR point per game floor that Bijan has.
I think the interesting part of this is we don't know what life is like for a full season for Jahmyr Gibbs without David Montgomery. We have a sample size. There's 6 games in the last 2 years that Montgomery has missed. In those 6 games, Gibbs has averaged over 25 PPR points per game. And in the 4 games that he missed in 2024, we saw Gibbs over 32 PPR points per game. He was an absolute monster. So we're hoping that that's going to be the guy that we see. But again, Pacheco could be that short yardage guy. I think Heath is right. I don't think he's as good as Dave Montgomery and probably not as good as Brian Robinson, but he could be that guy. And there is a new offensive coordinator for the Lions. Obviously, there's a new head coach for the Falcons. Now, Stefanski feels like when he's had 2 guys, he's wanted to use 2 guys. Now, he's never really had well, I shouldn't say Nick Chubb wasn't as good as Bijan Robinson. They're different. But he had a premier running back, but he still used 2 guys with Nick Chubb when he had Kareem Hunt in the successful part of that duo when they were together in Cleveland. So it's going to be interesting to see. And plus, there's also just the thing that it comes down to for me is we know what Detroit is, even with a new offense coordinator. And look, changes on the offensive line. They've lost a couple of guys, which is, potentially a little nerve-wracking. Obviously, Atlanta's offensive line, I think, is rounding into shape and looking pretty good. But there's still some questions. Tua Tagovailoa, is he going to be the starter? Is that a good thing for Bijan Robinson? Is Michael Penix going to be the starter? Is he going to be healthy? what are they going to both look like in terms of the quarterbacks with a new coach? Because we've never seen these guys play for Stefanski. So there's still questions. Obviously, you look at the year that Bijan just had; he was better than Gibbs by, I think it was a point in terms of their point per game. It was close. Robinson was third overall in terms of non-quarterbacks. Gibbs, I believe, was fourth or fifth. So they were right there with each other in terms of where they were, competing for. But I think they did best. It's almost like you just want to have somebody else make the decision for you, unless you just have that strong of a feeling. Now, in terms of Brian Robinson, how soon do you feel like you need to handcuff Bijan Robinson, if you need to handcuff him at all, Dave? Do you want to target Brian Robinson if you're the Bijan Robinson manager?
The deeper the league, the more interested I would be in doing it, but I wouldn't prioritize it. It wouldn't be the same as, all right, I'm drafting Christian McCaffrey and I want to have the guy behind Christian McCaffrey. Like that type of thing where that there's a bit of an injury concern and you just want to safeguard yourself with a running back that's in a great offense. That's when I would go and prioritize taking the guy behind the guy. In this case, number one, I don't think a lot of people are clamoring for Brian Robinson Jr. in fantasy drafts. And number two, if you've got Bijan and he goes down, it doesn't matter if you've got Brian Robinson or not. Your fantasy team's in trouble. But at least you'll have a running back on your bench if you're thin at the position. Obviously, we want to have guys who can start in place of other guys. I think round 10 would probably be the time when I would start to look for Brian Robinson, because I don't think a lot of other people in the league without Bijan Robinson on their team would be that interested in drafting Brian Robinson.
Heath, Dave brought up the second part of this, which is now Christian McCaffrey does not have a guaranteed backup. Now, we knew this because Robinson was a free agent, it was on the end of his contract there. Assuming they don't do anything, are you looking at Isaac Guerendo or Jordan James as somebody that you want to target in your fantasy drafts because of McCaffrey being 30, coming off a year where he had, significant workload once again?
I'm looking at that as one of the more interesting camp battles of guys that aren't going to be starters. So I think it will be important which of the hard thing is, if you're drafting before that battle is settled, I mean, it's hard to take either one of them. But and the way San Francisco running backs have worked throughout history is one of them will probably get hurt, and then the other guy will be the RB2. But yes, whichever one is the RB2, and I would probably lean ever so slightly towards Jordan James right now. But whichever one of the guys is the RB2, I'd have some interest in them. The other thing is, like, we've got the age from McCaffrey, the injury history, the workload from last year. But if you just forget about all that, in projections, he's my top projected running back, because when he plays, he's the best running back.
Yep. It's going to be very interesting to see where Christian McCaffrey goes in drafts, and very interesting to see where he's ranked. And that's going to lead us into our topic for today. Just one more news item, which really isn't of anything significance as of now. We had 2 quarterback signings yesterday. Joe Flacco stays with the Bengals, so he'll be the backup to Joe Burrow. Maybe he was watching the flag football game over the weekend and decided that's a little crazy, so I'll just stay in Cincinnati in case something happens to Burrow once again. And Zach Wilson goes from the Dolphins to the Saints. He'll be the most likely backup to Tyler Shuck. Spencer Rattler's still there, but I would imagine Wilson has the inside track to be the number 2 quarterback there in New Orleans. All right, so let's start with Dave's list of rankings changes. And I'm going to get to one guy before we take a break, because Dave's got, shocking, 4 running backs of his 5 players that we're going to discuss, and 1 wide receiver. So Emeka Egbuka is the 1 wide receiver, Dave. Where do you have him ranked, and how much did you get excited about him now that Mike Evans is a starting wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers?
That was the first part of it. The second part, Jamie, was reevaluating him when I went through all of the analysis and, the exercises that I go through when players change teams. The things I went through when Jaylen Waddle got moved to Denver. We did that mock draft last week. I took Waddle late in round 3, and I started looking at all the other receivers that I did not take. And I had to ask myself, why not Egbuka? Why not somebody that's got huge upside, someone who we've seen play well? Obviously, we've seen him play poorly when he was banged up, when his quarterback was banged up, when the offense just wasn't the same. And I've said this before. I think I said it already this week, actually. I expect Tampa to be one of those teams that has a good offense and a bad defense. And that combination makes me want to gravitate toward players on that team. This should be the number 1 target getter in Tampa. We know that in his second year, he should be able to be even better than he was in his first year. That's not saying much after how he finished the year. But I think there's just upside for Egbuka to be a top 10 wide receiver this season. You don't have to draft him as such. I think he's worth a third-round pick, much more so than Jalen Waddle at this point. And I've got him as wide receiver 15 in full PPR as we sit here today.
Heath, with your projections, Dave said leading the team in targets. How does that compare to Chris Godwin, maybe Jalen McMillan? And do we think that the Bucks receiving core is done, or could they potentially add somebody else? Because they surprised us last year, I think, when they drafted Egbuka, knowing that they were bringing back Evans and Godwin. And, it seemed as if it was a little bit of a shocking move. But then when you took a step back and say, okay, this is a guy for the future, he was clearly a guy for the now. How do you see the targets being distributed in Tampa Bay?
Right now, I do have Egbuka pretty clearly as the number one target earner for Tampa Bay. I do think, and we talked about this, I think, on Monday, if Chris Godwin is back to Chris Godwin, then that's not certain at all that Egbuka, because he does have a much longer history with Baker Mayfield. He has been a guy who, even when Mike Evans was awesome, Chris Godwin often earned more targets than him. And so that if Godwin is all the way back and returns to form, then I think it could be really close between those two. I've got Egbuka wide receiver 19, so just a little bit lower. I seem to have just a little bit more concern about who Baker Mayfield is this year, because we didn't see the same guy last year, and we've rarely seen the same guy 2 years in a row in Baker Mayfield's career. So I don't know that this is going to be a great offense, but right now, yeah, I think he's a top 20 wide receiver, and for the time being, the number one target earner on Tampa Bay.
Can you give me a few of the receivers you have over Egbuka?
Luther Burden.
Okay. All right. That's a guy I've got behind Egbuka. Okay, that's fair.
It's very interesting with this receiving core, because McMillan, I'm sure, is going to be one of their outside receivers, but Egbuka and Godwin are very versatile. They could both play inside, play outside, and we'll see how they use these guys. And really, whoever ends up being their slot guy could be very heavily targeted based on Baker's track record. Plus, you also have, once again, for Baker Mayfield, another new offensive coordinator. Zach Robinson will be the play caller in Tampa Bay. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back and get into the rest of Dave's list, which are all running backs, get into Heath's list, get into my list, we'll tell you about our rankings changes following free agency.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ hits every highlight from all the sports that matter to you.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, streaming free 24/7.
All right, we got 4 running backs left of Dave's 5 guys. Chuba Hubbard, Bhayshul Tuten, Jaylen Warren, and Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Dave, let's start with Chuba Hubbard. We talked about this a little bit when we were reviewing the mock draft. He went around 6. I drafted him as my number 2 running back. As we sit here today, prior to the NFL draft, he benefits in a big way with Rico Dowdle leaving. Jonathan Brooks a little uncertain in terms of his recovery from his second torn ACL. So where are you comfortable drafting Chuba Hubbard, and where do you have him ranked?
Right about where you took him, maybe a little bit past that is where I'd be okay with Chuba Hubbard. I've got him as a borderline RB2. Again, as we sit here now, I don't know if I'm buying that the Panthers are done with their running back room just because they signed A.J. Dillon, kept Trevor Etienne, Jonathan Brooks on the way back, and Chuba is the guy that they paid. I could see them adding another running back in the draft, and the higher the draft capital that they spend on a running back, the less I'll be excited about Chuba Hubbard. I mentioned this earlier in the week. Here's what it is. 12 of 18 games. I said 20, but it's actually 18 games over the last 2 years. When he's had 14-plus touches, he's had at least 15 PPR points. Like any running back, when he has volume, he puts up good numbers for fantasy. The problem is that when he doesn't have volume, he stinks. He hasn't even gotten to 10 PPR points in a game when he's had 13 or fewer carries or touches over the last 2 seasons. So, yeah, if things stand pat in the Panthers' backfield, maybe he will go higher than round 6 and maybe even higher than round 5, because fantasy managers will gravitate toward a guy who they see as being a lead back for an improving Carolina team. Their offensive line will be better. Their defense will be better. It'll set up a little bit nicely for whoever that top running back is. I just don't know if we can sit here late March and say, yeah, it's definitely going to be Chuba Hubbard. But for now, he's a name you got to keep in mind as somebody who could be a good back-end RB2.
If he does open the season as the starter for the Panthers, is this a league-winning type of guy, or is this more of a settle-for type of guy?
I think it's more of a settle-for type of guy, but I've been I was a big Jonathan Brooks guy, and there's been some buzz around Carolina that they're excited about him. And so if the reports are good, I'm probably more open to the possibility that Jonathan Brooks is going to carve out a role in this offense. They liked him as a pass catcher a lot coming out of college as well. So I do think And if he's not, then I think they probably add someone else. I'm probably going to be a little bit lower on Chuba Hubbard just because of that, because of the very limited track record of him being really good as a rusher. He had a great season in 2024. Last year, he kind of came back to earth. And I don't know that this is a great offense for a running back.
We'll see. I mean, the offensive line, they continue to retool it, adding another piece this offseason. So,
yep.
I mean, I think if it does stand pat, I think we're all kind of waiting to see what they do. I don't think it's going to be a high profile guy because there's not a lot of them in this draft class. But if they do spend a day 2 pick on someone, then that's something that's probably telling on Brooks and his recovery and what they think of Chuba. But if they stand pat, that's an encouraging sign for Brooks, obviously, but also an encouraging sign for Hubbard. And I think to your point, Heath, if we start to get buzz about Brooks and drives down the price for Chuba Hubbard, he's going to end up, I think, being one of the better value picks because we just don't know what Brooks will bring. If Brooks is back, then it's, maybe a little bit of a waste of a pick on Hubbard. But I think round 6 for now is a good round or a good range to target somebody like him. Again, a guy that could still be a back-end running back too, depending on how you build your team, and hopefully get back to that 2024 production that we saw. All right, Bhayshul Tuten right now is in.
If we draft Chuba as a settle for RB2, do we also target Brooks then in that round 9-10 range? Same range that we were sort of talking about for Brian Robinson, but maybe a little bit ahead of Brian Robinson. And then you lock up the Panthers backfield as your RB2. I don't think that that's a bad plan.
If Brooks is healthy, it'd be one of my favorite quote unquote handcuffs.
Sure. But if Brooks is healthy and the headlines are great out of training camp, you can kiss round 9 goodbye. It'll be more like maybe round 8.
Bhayshul Tuten right now is in a great spot. Went in a similar range as Chuba Hubbard, round 6 in the last draft that we did. Again, you can see the results of the last podcast, two of the last 3 podcasts that we've done. If you're watching on YouTube, and you could also read the story on CBSSports.com. But Bhayshul Tuten right now, as it stands, the number 1 running back in Jacksonville, unless of course you're listening to our mailbag, where Dan Schneider made the case that maybe Chris Rodriguez is the number 1 running back for the Jaguars. Now, Dan was not saying that you should be drafting Rodriguez over Tuten at this point, but there is the history of Rodriguez with the head coach. They were together in Kentucky. So Liam Cohen, play caller for the Wildcats. Chris Rodriguez was a running back there. So Dave, when you look at this, is this another backfield that you want to lock up, or you just want to target Bhayshul Tuten and hope that he's the lead running back for Jacksonville and just takes over for what Travis Etienne did for the Jaguars last season?
I think I'd be a little more encouraged with Tuten than I would be with Chuba Hubbard. I think Jacksonville's backfield is kind of done. I know that Liam Cohen likes utilizing 3 running backs, and that's the downside of it with Bhayshul Tuten, because I think not only will Tuten play and Rodriguez play, but LaQuint Allen, we saw him in a role as a passing downs running back, more of a pass protector than anything else last year. I think that role is locked up for Allen. Not that that makes him any good for fantasy. You shouldn't draft him. But the other 2 running backs, just given the fact that they signed Rodriguez, they drafted Tuten last year, I feel like Jacksonville's good with their backfield. And if that's the case, I like Tuten as the best talent of the 3 and somebody who can certainly improve on the numbers they had last year. I kind of throw out a lot of the stats that he had last year because he was used so sporadically, never really had a chance to be the lead running back. And in those situations, I like to fall back on what I know about the player from college and what we see on film from him. And that's somebody who's got great speed and someone who's got good versatility. Could he end up being a trap back? That's a worry that I've got. Somebody who gets a lot of carries, doesn't work near the goal line, doesn't catch a ton of passes. Obviously, that would be a problem for fantasy managers, and that's why we're drafting him in this round 6 type range. But the Jacksonville offense is awesome. I think their offensive line's pretty good as well. Getting the lead running back there would be something that could end up being a great pick for fantasy, and I wouldn't be opposed. Another backfield where if I end up getting Tuten, I can target Chris Rodriguez in that round 9-ish range and lock up the Jacksonville backfield, and I might feel better about that backfield than I would the Carolina backfield.
Heath, which of the 2 backfields that we discussed so far do you think is most likely to add to it from the NFL draft, Carolina or Jacksonville?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised if either one did, though. I think it just like we said, if Carolina does, that will tell us how Jonathan Brooks is doing in his recovery. I think if Jacksonville does, then that will tell us how they feel about Bhayshul Tuten turning into a lead running back, because he came into the NFL with all these exciting metrics and abilities and these huge question marks about his role in the passing game and his ability to hold on to the football. And I don't know that those questions have been fully answered yet.
The Jaguars were rumored to be interested in J.K. Dobbins, interested in Tyler Algier, settled for, I think if you're just looking at it from, broad view, in my opinion, at least, Chris Rodriguez, if those are the two guys that they were talking about. So it feels like there's another shoe that's still going to drop for this team. They sort of retooled their backfield last year a little bit by trading Tank Bigsby, by getting Bhayshul Tuten, by getting LaQuinn Allen, and to Dave's point, they played Allen a lot on third down, but they didn't let him touch the ball a lot on third down. It was almost like he was an extension of their offensive line, but a very good pass blocker. So we'll see what they decide to do. But again, right now, Tuten's in a great spot. Understandable why his value is on the rise and his rankings have improved. Jaylen Warren, however, got some significant competition, Dave. So Rico Dowdle joins the Steelers. He's reunited with Mike McCarthy. McCarthy was the guy who allowed Rico Dowdle to sort of flourish in Dallas, and then now they're reunited again in Pittsburgh. So I'm assuming Jaylen Warren's stock is going down for you.
Obviously. And this is somebody who's a different type of battery mate than Kenneth Gainwell was. And maybe this ends up helping Jaylen Warren get more targets and be a bigger factor in the passing game. Aaron Rodgers, we're assuming that he's going to be the quarterback there. I don't see Rodgers' playing style changing, even though McCarthy is the new head coach. I still think he's going to try and get the ball out quick. I think he's still going to lean on his running backs as check down guys, or when he's pressured, he's just got to get the ball out, and it's going to go to them. And if Warren ends up playing way more passing downs than Dowdle, then maybe this is going to look silly. And Warren will end up being much better for PPR fantasy than anything else, because we could see that target volume go way up if he's getting the Kenneth Gainwell role. But he's also going to see his carries go down. He had a career-high 211 carries. It was his first year, Jamie, with more than 150 carries in a season. And between that and the number of targets and catches that he did have last year, it was his best fantasy season. At least on a per-game average, he was north of 13 PPR points per game. It was kind of what I was expecting from him a couple of years ago. He finally got around to it this past year. Maybe he comes close to it again this year, but I don't love the prospect of Dowdle potentially taking him off the field at one point during the year on first and second downs, and it leaves Warren in a smaller role. That would make me not want to take him where I would normally take Warren, which is as a borderline number 2 fantasy running back. Now, for me, he's definitely a number 3 fantasy running back.
Heath, in 2023, Jaylen Warren was still almost exactly what Dave said, a borderline number 2 running back when he was sharing with Najee Harris. 2024 is, I think, the year Dave's alluding to, where I think we were all excited about what he could become, and Najee was still a thing, and Jaylen Warren was dealing with injuries and did not have that year to take a step forward. We see it last year, and now here comes Rico Dowdle, and I think Jaylen Warren has shown us a few different versions of himself, where he can be a good secondary option, where he can be involved in the passing game and have success, where he could be a lead running back like we saw last year and sort of be that type of player. So does Rico Dowdle scare you enough to want to avoid Jaylen Warren, or are you going to say, oh, you know what, I'll just take maybe whichever Steelers running back goes second if I want to get a piece of this backfield?
I've got those two at kind of a coin flip right now in terms of who's going to be better. So I'll definitely take whoever is second. That doesn't mean I wouldn't take Jaylen Warren. I think I'd still rather take Jaylen Warren personally than I would Bhayshul Tuten or Chuba Hubbard. So I think there'll be the thing that scares me, though. We talked about the connection with Liam Cohen with Chris Rodriguez. Well, this is Mike McCarthy bringing in a guy in Rico Dowdle it was on his team in Dallas. And so I do worry just a little bit that he has an edge on Warren from the gate.
It's certainly something to keep an eye on. It's going to be one of the more fascinating camp battles to watch, to see how the Steelers use these guys. And obviously, we're still waiting to see who the quarterback is going to be, although we all anticipated being Aaron Rodgers coming back to the Steelers in 2026. Another backfield to watch is in Washington. Dave's last guy that we're talking about here is Jacory Croskey-Merritt. So, Dave, we sent these lists via text, and we didn't really say up or down in terms of where they are in the rankings. And I'm curious, did Croskey-Merritt move up or did he move down? Because he gets the benefit of, at least right now, looking like the lead running back, but they add Rachaad White. They bring back Jeremy McNichols. Is this a winner or loser for you following free agency?
Don't forget that Jerome Ford's on this roster now too. Not that it's a big deal, but I feel like he's moving down. I don't know if I want to trust Jacory Croskey-Merritt as maybe an at best 2-down player for Washington in an offense that still has Jaden Daniels under center and somebody who could still run, and a team that's going to want to throw the ball still quite a bit, even though they don't have Zach Ertz to begin the year theoretically. He's not even on the team. On top of that, no Deebo Samuel on the roster right now. I'm nervous about Croskey-Merritt being a good fantasy running back, and that's especially the case in full PPR because I don't think he's going to catch anything. And if you're not catching the ball, you're not going to get a huge amount. Your upside's gone, basically, unless you score a ton of touchdowns. I don't think he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. I think Rachaad White is going to be their goal line back. I think White and Ford are going to be the pass catchers in Washington, and they could always end up drafting a running back as well with their first-round pick or a day 2 pick, and that would further push Croskey-Merritt. I don't really have an intention of drafting him even in our mock drafts unless he just falls way, way down. And by the time I would take him, somebody else will have already snapped him up.
Heath, you feel the same way? And just for me, I'm curious to see what Croskey-Merritt looks like if he gets a full season and I agree with Dave. I think first and second down, I don't think he's going to, all of a sudden morph into a pass catcher when they bring in Rachaad White. But to see what he looks like with Jaden Daniels, because we really get a chance to see that last year, because by the time Croskey-Merritt had some of his good games, Jaden Daniels was significantly banged up.
I like Bhayshul Tuten more than Jacory Croskey-Merritt, but I don't have any idea what to think about the Washington backfield right now. And so it's kind of just if I can get him as a number 3 running back, I still think he has upside to be a top 20 guy because he's so good as a rusher. There were just things that he couldn't do last year. And listen, Dave talked about it with Egbuka. Guys improve between their rookie year and their second year. If he has improved some of the deficiencies in his game and he gets to be on the field a little bit more, he's certainly going to be a committee back. He's not going to play third downs. Most likely, Bhayshul Tuten's not going to play third downs just because LaQuint Allen's going to be the guy on the field. And so I think they could be very similar. It's just whether Chris Rodriguez or Rachaad White matters more on early downs.
Yeah, and obviously Rachaad White's got a pretty, lengthy resume by comparison.
Right.
So we'll see how he factors in, and he may end up being the best running back for Washington. We said this in our mock draft review that we didn't like Rachaad White in round 7, but that doesn't mean that he can't end up there if he wins the training camp battle and is the best running back in Washington to open the season. All right, let's move on to Heath's list, and I'm going to start with I'm just going to lump 2 guys together because I have them ranked back to back. I'm curious, or very similar, where you have the 2 quarterbacks on your list. So Heath's list is Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, Isaiah Likely, Kyle Pitts, and Khalil Shakir. A lot of K's there. So let's start with the quarterbacks here. We got Malik Willis and Kyler Murray. Which one moved up more, and which one do you have ranked higher?
So I think Malik Willis has been a roller coaster because he moved up a lot when he got the starting job with Miami. He took a little bit of a hit when they traded away his only wide receiver. And I think their top 2 wide receivers right now might be Jalen Tolbert and Malik Washington. They've added other guys, but they need wide receivers. So I'll take Kyler Murray right now just ahead of Malik Willis in a 1 quarterback league. In super flex, I think you have to favor Willis just because there's still some risk that Kyler Murray doesn't win the starting job. I don't really believe that risk exists for Malik Willis. Both of these guys could run for 700 yards. Both of these guys have given us reason to be optimistic about what they can do as a passer. Not good, but optimistic. And then the big difference is Kyler Murray has Justin Jefferson. Malik Willis has no one.
And Jordan Addison and Kevin O'Connell, at least the
right
coach. So Dave, we've talked a little bit, about Malik Willis when he signed and following the Jaylen Waddle trade. I don't think you were on the Jaylen Waddle show. You definitely weren't because you were gone. So does Willis without Waddle change dramatically from the standpoint of how fantasy managers should view him in the frame of we expect him to run a lot? The allure to what Malik Willis could be might be the best running quarterback in fantasy based on how this offense may look. Did things really change for the worse without Waddle there that much?
A little, because we're talking about a receiver in Jaylen Waddle who has excelled making plays after the catch, and those numbers add up for the quarterback. And Heath really hit it. It's not going to be a great receiving core for Malik Willis in Miami. To me, that's a huge differentiator between Murray and Malik Willis. But if you're drafting Malik Willis, you're doing it because of the rushing. And he said there's potential for 700 yards. There's potential for 1,000 rushing yards from Malik Willis in this Dolphins offense, because I don't know what else they're really going to do. I think that's a really ugly looking receiving room, and it's going to be hard for Willis. It's going to be hard to project him. In fact, I'm curious, Heath, what you have Malik projected for on a per game basis. Can he even find 175 yards per game? And if I'm drafting a quarterback that has that low of a projection, he better run his tail off, and he better rush for a bunch of touchdowns to make up for it. Whereas Kyler Murray, he won't run for 1,000 yards. I'd be surprised if he ran for 700 yards. It might be more like 500 yards, but that's still awesome. He'll still run for 4 or 5 touchdowns. And on top of that, we know about his receiving core, and we know about Kevin O'Connell and what he's done with literally every quarterback he's had other than JJ McCarthy. So I would prefer to draft Kyler, but I'm in the market for either of those quarterbacks when we get to the back half of fantasy drafts, and I'm ready to commit to 2 quarterbacks on my fantasy team.
I haven't downgraded Willis probably as much as I will, because it's not going to stay like this. Like, the wide receiver is both the position that still has the most established veterans available in free agency and the position that is the best and deepest in this draft class. So the Dolphins I would guess the Dolphins' top 2 wide receivers are not currently on the team. It's just finding out who those guys are and how good they are will make a big difference. Like, just looking at free agency, and I don't know if any of these guys would even go to Miami, but we still got Tyreek Hill's not going to do it. Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings. Like, there's a lot of guys. Keenan Allen. There's a lot of vets that would be easily the wide receiver 1 on this team right now.
Yep, and 2 first-round picks following the trade of Waddle. So they have Denver's first-round pick at 30th overall. Dolphins have the 11th overall pick, so we'll see what they decide to do. But yes, certainly some still uncertainties with these guys. Dave, just yes or no? You said you would look at these guys as if you're taking 2 quarterbacks. Would you take these 2 quarterbacks to be your only quarterbacks on your fantasy roster? Just yes or no?
No.
Heath, same question.
No.
So you'd rather have a more proven guy with better floor, and the ceiling for both these guys is obviously pretty high. All right, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back and get into the rest of Heath's list, I'll give you my 5 guys that have changed as a result of free agency and more rankings changes here on Fantasy Football Today.
You think you understand how this business works, but you don't.
I now know why Monty was so stressed.
What's the plan here?
Landman. New season now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
All right, we talked about 2 of Heath's guys, the quarterbacks, Malik Willis and Kyler Murray. Now we have 2 tight ends to look at here in Isaiah Likely and Kyle Pitts. So, Heath, when it comes to Likely, he changed teams. He goes from the Ravens to the Giants. Obviously a huge upgrade. How much of an upgrade, though, for you in your rankings? Is he a top 10 guy, a top 5 guy? Is this a must-draft player? Is he a league winner now that he's the starting tight end for the New York Giants?
Just a little peek behind the curtain. One of the things I've been working on for the last few weeks is trying to lower Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitts, and Isaiah Likely in my projections, because I've just absolutely loved what's happened for those guys this offseason. And I think we've talked a lot about Drew Petzing and Kevin Stefanski and their offensive system and how much you throw the ball to tight ends. And I think people don't talk about it with the Giants because nobody knows how much Matt Nagy was involved in the offense in Kansas City and actually calling plays. And nobody really thinks Harbaugh had much to do with it in Baltimore. But both of those guys also come from offenses where the tight end is an enormous part of the offensive game plan. And so the only addition they've made that really matters at wide receiver is Darnell Mooney, right? Like, I think there's a chance that Isaiah Likely's and Jackson Dart showed last year with Theo Johnson at times that he likes to throw the ball to his tight ends. So I'm going to probably end up settling with Likely right around tight end 6. The first run at projections had him at tight end 4. I think this is an extremely talented guy that walks into a situation where he has the opportunity to have 100+ targets as the number 2 target on his own team.
Dave, do me a favor. Look up what Matt Nagy's targets to tight ends were when he was the head coach of the Bears, because that could tell us
Sure. Give me
a
a
little
minute.
bit about maybe where we're looking at from this. But so tight end 6. So your top 5 guys, I'm going to assume, are McBride, Bowers, Loveland, Warren, Fannin. Oh no, you like Laporta. Laporta's 4.
Yeah, I'm going to have Laporta ahead of Warren for sure, and I'm going to have Laporta ahead of Fannin for sure.
So Laporta 4.
What I'm really struggling with right now, and like when we're talking about rankings, I think everybody knows they go to the site. We don't actually have rankings published, and so it's all kind of a fluid discussion right now about where these guys are. The group I struggle with is Pitts, Likely, Kraft, Warren, Fannin, and like that's now we're down to 9 tight ends with those top 4 that you gave, which is one of the reasons that I have a really hard time taking guys in round 4 and 5 that I think are still in the discussion with guys that are available in round 8 and 9. Like Adam took Likely in round 10, I think, in our last mock draft.
Yes.
It's huge upside.
We did the sort of the state of the tight ends on Fantasy Football Today Express yesterday, and I said I love what Adam did. He took Likely and Kelsey, and Kelsey was having a great season by all standards of where he is right now, before Mahomes suffered the ACL tear in week 14. And so, you got basically, for me, those are 2 top 10 tight ends. I think I have Likely at 9 and Kelsey at 10. So that's a unbelievable pairing if you're going to wait that long to take 2 swings at the position. Because look, Likely could fail. You brought up all the positives. He's had some opportunities, not many, in Baltimore when Mark Andrews has been hurt. And then, we don't know what Jackson Dart looks like with Malik Neighbors. They played half of a game together when Dart was a starter in week 4, when Neighbors suffered the torn ACL. But we also don't know what version of Malik Neighbors we're getting. You mentioned Darnell Mooney. They still may add to the receiving core, but it feels like they may be done as well. So, and then Kelsey could, easily still be a starting caliber tight end. But I think Isaiah Likely is one of the more intriguing players this year, because you're going to get him at a discount by comparison to the younger tight ends, certainly by comparison to McBride and Bowers. And you may have a top 5 caliber player. Dave, did you find the Nagy numbers when he was the Bears coach?
Sure. So with Chicago, Matt Nagy, his first year there, he signed Trey Burton. It was a large contract, $22 million guaranteed. Burton averaged 9.2 PPR points per game, 4.8 targets per game. And I remember liking Trey Burton back then and targeting him in drafts, and then he underwhelmed a little bit. The only tight end that Nagy's had good success with, and then that 9.2 PPR points per game, that's the best it ever got for a tight end in Chicago under Matt Nagy. It's Kelsey, but Travis Kelsey is a completely different type of tight end than Isaiah Likely is, and the target volume, obviously, for Kelsey, he worked as more of a number 1 wide receiver for the majority of his time in Kansas City. I don't think Isaiah Likely is going to be anywhere close to that in New York. I don't mind Likely as a top 10 pick in fantasy tight ends, among the tight ends, not as a top 10 pick overall. Maybe we're taking him in the mid rounds and feeling okay about it to begin the season, but I don't want to overcommit to somebody who hasn't been committed to in 4 years by John Harbaugh, who's still his head coach in New York. And as long as Malik Neighbors comes back and he's healthy, we know he's going to be the top target getter. And I still think there's some pieces in this Giants offense that we don't know about yet. We should double check this by the time we get to May 1st, see what they do in the draft, and then decide just how high Isaiah Likely should be in our rankings.
All right. So he's 6th for Heath, right? Is that projections or rankings?
Yeah.
And where is he for you, Dave?
10th.
10th. Okay. So still top 10 tight end.
Yeah. He's draftable for sure. But I don't want to put him in the same boat as Kraft, Pitts, and Laporta just yet.
So Kyle Pitts did not change teams. He got the franchise tag, and I think we'll probably all agree if he's a holdout, that's gonna make us a little uncomfortable about how maybe high we may have him ranked. Heath, Pitts last year, best year of his career. Finally looked like the guy we've been waiting for. A lot of his great games came when Drake London was banged up, so take that into account. And a lot of his great games, along with that, came with Kirk Cousins under center. So now we have a different quarterback, most likely Tua Tagovailoa or banged up Michael Penix. We have a new coach in Kevin Stefanski, which I think we'll all agree is a huge positive based on his track record with tight ends. is Kyle Pitts going to disappoint us once again? Because once upon a time, he had one great season. It was his rookie year. And then we've been chasing that year ever since until what he did last year when nobody drafted him as a starting tight end in fantasy.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to disappoint us because I think he went 2 rounds earlier than likely in the most recent mock draft. And I think so people have been disappointed so often that he's just, his ADP is not going to get pushed up that high. We've talked about it a lot. Stefanski's offense, like 10 targets per game, 2 tight ends. They won't all go to the same guy, but an excellent chance, just like likely, for Pitts to be the second target in this offense in terms of total targets. He's averaged 7.9 yards per target over his career, which is good for a tight end. The big problem has been the touchdowns. The fun thing is he scored 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So I think you can count on 6 touchdowns next year. He sets a new career high every year. And I just, listen, sometimes the coordinator stuff doesn't work out. Sometimes it does. I think Stefanski and the fact that the guy who was offensive coordinator under him went somewhere else and we saw the same trend makes me a little bit more confident in that aspect of the offense. They will get him easy targets. That's what that offense is really known for, is those dump off targets, that kind of PPR cheat code type targets. And so I think Kyle Pitts could be the number 1 tight end. You can draft him as the number 8 tight end.
The things that you look at, it's not just the coordinator or the coach in Stefanski, because there's that track record. I think Tua has shown us with 2 different versions of tight ends. Yes. He was very good for Jonnu Smith in 2024. Mm-hmm. And in a very small sample size, he was good with Darren Waller last year as well. You know, not necessarily from a huge volume standpoint, but just from a fantasy production standpoint, Tua and Waller had a very solid connection in the 3 or 4 games that they played together. The other thing, which I hope will lead to a contract extension for Kyle Pitts, at least to avoid, or, you know, something to avoid the holdout, is the guy that's now calling the shots for the Falcons was his quarterback in his rookie season, and that's Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
And so, you know, hopefully Ryan convinces ownership to make a commitment to Kyle Pitts, and then we have this pairing for maybe a couple of years so you can see what Pitts can do in Stefanski's offense, certainly for people in dynasty leagues. Dave, I'm going to guess you're a little bit more skeptical of Kyle Pitts just based on how you've treated him the last couple of years.
Yeah, no question of points per game on 6.2 targets per game in 12 games with Drake London. I would say that that's pretty good for Kyle Pitts, especially when you look at his years before 2025. His numbers were inflated because of those 5 games he played without Drake London. And I think the Tua Tagovailoa point is very valid. If he's the starter for the Falcons, at least to begin the season, this is a dude who wants to get the ball out quick. And when that's the case, you're going to look for a tight end like Kyle Pitts who can catch the ball and then may make a play after the catch. So there is some potential for Kyle Pitts to be a double-digit PPR guy, not just at the beginning of the year, but maybe carry it all through the season. But I don't see the same type of upside, except when he plays against the Bucks, because apparently he's good for like 2 touchdowns and 175 yards each time he goes up against Tampa. Those weeks we'll be starting Kyle Pitts. But otherwise, I'm not excited to draft him. I'd rather have Laporta. I'd rather have Kraft. I'd rather have those top 5 studs. I think that's easy to say. And so if that means that he's tight end 8 by default, that's just kind of indictment on what the rest of the tight ends look like after the first 7 guys that we draft.
Tight end will be a fun position to discuss throughout the rest of this offseason, as will wide receiver. And the last guy on Heath's list is Khalil Shakir. So he gets company in Buffalo with the addition of DJ Moore. How do we feel about Khalil Shakir now, Heath?
Yeah, I am not excited about Khalil Shakir. I'm not expecting a huge increase in pass attempts after the offensive coordinator got promoted to the head coach. Maybe he throws a little bit more. He's never, kind of like Kyle Pitts, he's never been a touchdown guy. While he's been the number 1 wide receiver for this team, he's never had a season with more than 100 targets. Like, it's just, he's really awesome for Buffalo, and he catches almost everything you throw at him, and he makes a couple of big plays every year, but he's not somebody that I am really interested in drafting.
It's round 11. You recognize the name, and you take him to put on your bench.
If we do see an increase in pass attempts, though, so let's just say Joe Brady is free of Sean McDermott, and he says, you know what, I want to throw the ball 600 times, you know, or 580 times. I don't know what was their number last year?
495.
495. So let's just say it goes up 50. 50 more pass attempts.
Okay.
DJ Moore, obviously, we're all going to predict, rank to be the number 1 wide receiver in Buffalo. That's easy. If Shakir is number 2, and we see a bump in targets by, let's say, 15 to 20, does that change your opinion?
So I've got him projected for a bump in targets of 5 right now. So, and that puts him at wide receiver 41 in the projections. So if you added 10 more targets, then yeah, he could get into the low end wide receiver 3 conversation.
Okay. So if we're not going to, I can't imagine Joe Brady's going to, give his full offensive plan. But we hear rumblings that, next week at the owners' meetings, he's going to meet with the media. He's going to say, I want to open the offense a little bit more. I want to be a little bit more pass friendly and be a little bit more explosive and blah, 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 whatever he says. We could see hopefully a renaissance for all these guys. And we'll just move into, my 5 guys here, because DJ Moore is on the list. So DJ Moore is obviously a winner here, going from Chicago to Buffalo. For me, he's, you mentioned you have Burden over Egbuka. I still have more over Burden right now. That may change. That's certainly in pencil. As you said, our ranking's not on the site yet. So I'm curious, though, like how you view Buffalo's, both you guys, how you view Buffalo's new number 1 wide receiver compared to Chicago's 2 guys that are left. So Heath, for you, it's Burden, Moore, Odunze. Is that how you have it?
It is Burden, Moore, Odunze, and Burden and Moore are pretty close, and Odunze's 5 to 10 spots behind them.
Okay, I have it the same way, except just Moore 1 spot ahead of Burden, and Odunze about 5 spots behind. Dave, how do you have those 3 guys ranked?
They're all within 5 spots of each other, Burden, Odunze, Moore, and it goes back to what we talked about with the Bills and Joe Brady and how their tendency is to run the football between James Cook and Josh Allen. And until that target volume goes up across the board, the passing volume, I guess I should say, goes up across the board, it's hard to look at DJ Moore in the same lens as when he was in Carolina getting a ton of targets. Because when he got a ton of targets, and he got it in Chicago too, that's when he was at his best for fantasy. If we're coming off a year where Khalil Shakir was the target leader for Buffalo, it was 95 targets. I don't think DJ Moore is going to get 95. I think he's going to go higher than that. But he's also a little bit older than the last time that he was great. And I want to draft him closer to the floor than the ceiling, even though it is kind of exciting to think about him as the number 1 guy in Josh Allen's offense.
And being reunited with Joe Brady, where he's had, arguably
that's exciting too. You're right. Yep.
Best seasons. The one being the best was his first in Chicago. So Heath, how many targets do you have projected for DJ Moore?
121, and that is with Josh Allen throwing 526 passes, so 31 more than last year. I don't think I'd be surprised if he threw 550. So then maybe DJ Moore could get to 130. I think the big difference for me between DJ Moore, which I agree, big win for him, and Khalil Shakir is if I'm looking at the upside and things go right for the Bills pass attack, I could see DJ Moore become a borderline wide receiver 1. When I was talking about Khalil Shakir's upside, it was like maybe he could be a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to take DJ Moore, Chicago, circa 2024, or 2023, to show up for us to be that excited about him. But clearly, there's reasons to be excited about Moore now that he's in Buffalo. And the same thing with Romeo Doubs going to the Patriots. We talked a little bit about this in the mock draft review. I think going back to the free agency discussion, though, it felt as if we were closer collectively. Maybe it was just me, but closer collectively with Wan'Dale Robinson going to the Titans, Romeo Doubs going to the Patriots, Alec Pierce staying in Indianapolis when we did the first recap show, because that all happened on day 1 of free agency. I feel like Dobbs' upside is just untapped right now. We don't know what we're going to get from him because we've seen some good moments from him in Green Bay. We've seen some good moments when he's been targeted. But now he gets a chance to hopefully lead the Patriots to targets. Again, I don't know if this team is done in terms of what the receiving core looks like. There's still a lot of talk about A.J. Brown. I don't know if the Eagles are going to let him go. But where do you guys have Romeo Doubs? For me, he's wide receiver 34. So just inside the top 36 wide receivers.
He is wide receiver 38 for me. That is with 101 projected targets. Last year, the leader on the Patriots had 102, and Dobbs' career high is 96. So there's upside beyond that. It's just going to have to be upside beyond what anybody in New England saw last year and what Dobbs has ever seen in his career.
And I'm even further behind Heath on that. I like the idea of Dobbs as a bench receiver in fantasy. Don't want to reach for him and say he's going to be a slam dunk number 3 type of wide receiver. When we've seen 2 years of Drake May under center for the Patriots, the only guy to average even 10 PPR points per game was Stephon Diggs. That's right around that number 10 is right around where Dobbs has been. I want to draft him with that type of expectation. And I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to, because there will be people in every league that will view Dobbs. And this is as of now. If they add AJ Brown, obviously this changes totally. But there will be people who think that he will be the number 1 receiver in New England. And he might be by terms of like total raw targets that he gets, but it might not be a high number. It might be in the neighborhood of 6 targets per game. It's really hard to be a great fantasy wide receiver, or even like a regular contributor to lineups, when you're only getting 6 targets per game.
It's going to be interesting. The history of Josh McDaniels, number 1 receiver, has, for the most part, been good. I don't know how much you want to attach that to Stephon Diggs last year because of his age coming off the ACL. And, Dobbs may be in a similar situation. We've never seen him do this before or be in this type of scenario before. So we'll see. And to your point, Dave, there's Andy KB7G in our chat says if the wide receiver room stays as is, he'll be extremely bullish on Romeo. So there's going to be people that are very excited about Dobbs because of the scenario of being the number 1 receiver for Drake May. DK Metcalf now has competition in Pittsburgh, so he's a guy that's been significantly lowered in my rankings. I have him behind Dobbs as of now. That may change, but
same.
A little bit worried about DK Metcalf coming off of what I think most people would consider a disappointing season, and now the addition of Michael Pittman. Heath, you made a comment about Metcalf in the draft, but I don't think you explained it. You said something about Metcalf, and I don't know if you meant you're going to be bullish on his draft capital, where he'll go, but how do you feel about Metcalf now as the 1A or maybe even the 1B in Pittsburgh with Pittman now joining the Steelers?
I'm still of the opinion that DK Metcalf's better than Michael Pittman, and that DK Metcalf's going to see more targets than Michael Pittman. He's kind of like the Malik Willis roller coaster for me, because in my projections, it was a big win for DK Metcalf to go from Arthur Smith to Mike McCarthy. That's been a very pass-heavy offense, or at least, if not pass-heavy, high-volume pass attempt offense in the past. And so then it was a pullback when Michael Pittman was added. But because I'd already given him the boost up, I think I have DK Metcalf pretty close to where I had him last year. I think he's wide receiver 27 for me. So a high-end wide receiver 3 that I think has, quite a bit of upside.
I'm just nervous about what we saw at the end of the Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy pairing, and Rodgers being now 42 and running the play clock down to 0 every play, and, slowing things down in what McCarthy's offense may want to look like. And obviously McCarthy kind of being handcuffed a little bit because Rodgers being the best quarterback option that's available to him. It's a little different, I think, when he has Dak Prescott and what he could do with that offense, at least what he was able to do in Dallas. So I'm a little concerned about Metcalf, but look, I think McCarthy, I agree with you. McCarthy's definitely an upgrade over Arthur Smith. And so hopefully Rodgers in McCarthy's offense will be an upgrade as well. Last 2 guys we'll talk about here are Kenneth Walker and Emanuel Wilson. I think Walker is obvious in terms of being a rankings riser. Dave, where do you have Walker ranked now? For me, he's the 9th running back off the board, somebody I would take in the middle of round 2.
I've got him 13th. So I'm a little bit behind you on Walker. I see the appeal. I get the upside. I kind of like the idea of saying, we'll take what he did last year, add 10% to it, and then add like 5 touchdowns on top of it. And that would be pretty darn good for Kenneth Walker. But we also know the downside with Walker. Obviously, the injuries are a factor. We don't know if Kansas City is going to suddenly change into a run-heavy team. They've had a low run rate each of the last 5 seasons. I think it's going to come down to Patrick Mahomes and what his health is like. And if he's really back to his old self, then we're still going to see this team throw the ball 60% of the time. I don't think that's a great thing for Kenneth Walker. I don't want to reach for him over some other running backs that I think can still contribute highly to fantasy managers this year.
Heath, is this a better or worse scenario for Ken Walker, taking the Zach Charbonnet equation out of it? Is this a better offensive environment right now than what he's leaving.
I think if Zach Charbonnet you told me to take it out of it, but I think it's a worse one if Zach Charbonnet doesn't exist.
Yes.
And it's a better one if Zach Charbonnet is back by week 4 in himself.
Yes. So
I did not go with because they're going to run a lot less than Seattle did, I think. And I would.
You think early in the season when Mahomes is working his way back?
Maybe. I mean, I think they'll run more than they have in the past. But the difference between how often Seattle was running last year and how often Kansas City's run, period, with Patrick Mahomes is a wide gulf.
Do you fear, and this is my big concern with Walker, do you fear that what we saw from him in the postseason, which is not replicable over the course of 17 games, because he was just amazing. I mean, he was, if you just take his sample size of that stretch, the best player in fantasy last year. But, you know, do that with everybody's best stretch, but you get the point. That we're chasing, that people are going to be chasing that production, and he's not going to be as good with the Chiefs.
If he's where we have him ranked in that high-end RB2 range, then no. I think that's appropriate. If he starts getting drafted as a top 12 running back, then absolutely yes.
Okay, so I have him ranked too high by your standards.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't.
I'm curious who you've got ranked behind him, Jamie.
So right now he is just ahead of Josh Jacobs and Ashton Genty. Genty will be the one that moves ahead of him for sure if everything continues to point in a positive direction. Little bit worried that we may get some competition for Genty just based on what you've heard from this coaching staff initially. So we'll see. But you know, comparing him to Walker, obviously Kubiak was very comfortable using two guys last year, and that was not great for Walker during that stretch. So it's again very much in pencil where I have Walker ahead of I have Walker, Jacobs, Genty, Hampton right now. So those four guys I've shuffled a billion times in a row to see. And then the last one here is just I think somebody who's probably going to be, I know I'm going to target him a lot, is Emanuel Wilson, just with the idea of, can he win the starting running back job for Seattle with Charbonnet's delay in coming back from this ACL tear that he suffered in the divisional round against the 49ers? So Wilson, you know, we talked a little bit about Jonathan Brooks. We talked a little bit about Chris Rodriguez. I would, at this point, be targeting Emmanuel Wilson over both those guys. I don't know how you feel, Dave.
I would too, but I certainly don't expect Seattle to say that this is a finished running back room. This is a team that I'm actually hoping for makes a nice splash in the draft, maybe even takes two running backs in the draft, one on day 2 and then another one late on day 3, and they really add to the room that way. I think we're kind of dreaming when we talk about Zach Charbonnet being ready for even like the midpoint of the year, just because he tore his ACL in mid-January. And I don't know if we should expect big things from Charbonnet, and I think we should draft him accordingly. We don't know who those rookies will be that they add to the backfield, but Emmanuel Wilson isn't a rookie, and we've seen him play as a lead back before in Green Bay, and he's done really well. And even if he's part of a tandem to begin the year in Seattle, it's really good draft value if we're taking him in that same range as good. The names that he would probably be amongst at best would be like Monangai, Blake Corum, like those types of names. Emmanuel Wilson might be better than them, at least to begin the year. He might be a starter for your fantasy team to begin the year. It's the whole season outlook that I'd be really worried about with Emmanuel Wilson. But when we're taking him in the back half of a draft, who cares about the whole season outlook? Let's just get somebody that can help me get to a good start to begin the year. Perfect for drafters who love zero RB or hero RB.
You feel the same way, Heath, about the Seattle backfield, that we're not going to see Charbonnet maybe for a while? And is it Wilson or is it George Holani for you? Like, who's the guy that you're looking at in this backfield right now?
I think you asked earlier in the show who's more likely to add a running back, Carolina or Jacksonville. And if Seattle had been a part of that question, I think we all would have said Seattle. So, but as of right now, I would say Wilson is he'd have to be the favorite to be the starting running back week 1. I would be very surprised if we see Zach Charbonnet. I think really I'd be pretty surprised if we see Zach Charbonnet good this year. Like, it's just, it's got a really tough path to get back for week 1. And there's very few guys that show up off of PUP in the middle of the season and look good. It's just it's a hard thing to do in the NFL when everybody else is in midseason form and you're playing your first football game.
Certainly something that we'll be keeping an eye on. And obviously, as Dave said, and Heath agrees, the Seahawks could be one of those teams in the NFL draft that add to their backfield. All right, that'll do it for our rankings movers following free agency. Adam will be back on Thursday. I don't know what we'll be talking about, but we will be harassing him in person in our Fort Lauderdale studios. Looking forward to that. And we will talk to you on Thursday with another edition of Fantasy Football Today. For Dave, for Heath, for Thomas Schaefer, I'm Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Thursday.